How do you see, or how do you wish to see Bratislava's cultural scene in 10 years?
I think that considering the size of the city, our art scene, cultural scene is not poor, is quite rich and colorful. But what we need is to be more in contact or strengthen the bond with the audience, because we cannot perform without the audience. It doesn't have sense. So I hope that in 10 years the general public will be more used to attending the cultural events.
Well, the theater needs to go to his audience, to go anywhere. Not we can't expect that some, I don't know, poor child will come to the opera. We need to go to them.
When in August 1968 the occupation started, the only thing that remained from the formal political program was the autonomy for Slovakia and the federalization of the country. So since 1969, Slovaks had their own Ministry of Culture, which cared much more about the Slovak specialities that were different from those Czech ones. And that situation when before Czech side was acting like, okay, we have common state, we have common history, we have common everything. Now Slovaks tried to change this narration and had opportunity to move forward. Also, the person of former Minister of Culture Miroslav Válek, who is one of the most significant poets of 20th century in Slovakia, helped a lot because he gave to the art scene more space and more freedom than the Czech side had. So new institutions, new theaters were founded, and once the communism has fallen apart and the new countries separated, Slovakia had already prepared institutions for the future.
Six months ago, I arrived here along the Danube River to find some peace. The fascinating capital of a strange new country born after a so-called velvet divorce. A now quiet and charming city that went through turbulent times in the heart of Central Europe. Bratislava. When I first came here 6 months ago, I knew very little about Slovakia and Slovak culture. But as I got to know its people and its landscapes, I eventually developed a deep and sincere attachment to it. So my intention is not to deliver some bland resume from a history book or a biography of Ludus. And do you even know who Ludus is? I was welcomed by A4, the place for contemporary culture, where I had the chance to meet some young painters and musicians, dancers and technicians, or cinephiles and historians. But today, I would like to talk about theatre and the young theatre companies that contribute to the cultural richness of this country. I was warmly helped in this project by Ludus and by Huhol 92, who answered my questions and introduced me to their world. So I will show you some of my new perspectives, which are not exhaustive, and a few extracts from dialogues work, and life around theater in Slovakia. I'm not Slovak, as you will notice, but just today I can pretend I am.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jan Čapčík. I'm from Bratislava and I'm a historian.
And I work at A4.
And I work at A4. Okay, so unlike Prague, which has been for centuries the natural metropolis of Czech nation and was in the middle of the country, settled by Czechs, Bratislava was more connected with trading routes that were connecting Western and Southeastern Europe and as well the Southern and Northern Europe. This is how this multicultural melting pot was created here. Bratislava was for 247 years the capital city of the Kingdom of Hungary, but because it lies on a border practically next to Vienna, which was capital of the Holy Roman Empire, culturally Bratislava remained in shadow of Vienna, and it remained only as a political center of the Kingdom of Hungary. And that's why different ethnic groups settled here, Germans, Hungarians, Slovaks, Jews, also Croatians, Czechs and Italians, and all these people creating some multicultural city. Yeah, because in, for example, one apartment building, there lived one German family, then lived two Hungarian families, three Slovak families, and their children simply played together on the backyard. So
there was no Slovak neighborhood, Hungarian neighborhood.
Yeah,
it was
definitely
mixed together.
Yeah, it was mixed together. The culture, pre-war culture, was much more global. And once these people from the countryside came to Bratislava, they came their culture with them that was much more provincial.
The city's history reflects the coexistence of diverse cultures and minorities that have interacted and shared the public life. Someone could identify as both Slovak and Hungarian or German and Czechoslovak. And this was very specific to Central Europe, to its multicultural roots, and to the cities that have existed here until Second World War. It was only after this tragedy that the concept and vision of one homogeneous national culture linked to one single ethnic group was introduced to this part of Europe. So the multicultural city of Bratislava then became predominantly Slovak, and many of its former more open-minded inhabitants left the country or met tragic fates. And this cultural loss deprived the country of people who connected it to the rest of the world, and this had an impact on the cultural landscape for decades.
The existence of high culture was tied to higher social groups that consisted of burghers that were usually German and to rich people that usually were German or Jewish. And because these communities were displaced from Bratislava, their places were taken by people who came from rural areas and they brought with them some new visions of the national culture, so that high culture practically disappeared for a few years after the war and were replaced by folk art, folklore and ethnic art that was everything
I think that in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, the theater doesn't play the role it should play in the society, because, for example, in Poland, the audience knows that it's really important to go to theater because it's a place for discussion and confrontation. It's more political. And in our countries, I see that people more think that it's just fun, which I can agree with. And I don't know, like, it's not that important that it should be. My name is Barbara Chovancová. I'm a Czech theater director currently working in Slovakia. Stop, sorry, cut. Once again. I read a lot of foreign books, but like there is no concept. I'm just looking for a piece that I can fall in love. It's just intuitive for me. I'm just looking where I can fall in love again. Ludus theater is really for the young audience, so we are trying to face these things that are maybe forgotten or not understood right, to face them, just to show that there is still something very alive and strong in them.
Na policajnú stanicu na Plasan Sulpice vošli 25. decembra večer všetci traja. Vieš si to predstaviť?
It usually plays for, like in the morning, for organized groups that come with their teachers. And this performance, History of Violence, is the first to be played in the evening, like for young adults and adults. So it's quite a new experience for us. And if you ask me as a director, for me the whole piece is one composition with different parts. And since I'm married to a composer, I think about it more and more. So obviously music has a bigger role in my work since then. Like, I'm not really into classical theater with these situations and like well-known stories and roles. I'm always trying to think like, why are we should do this now, and how to make it like not obvious. And for me, the most important in History of Violence is that the performance is not a theater piece, but more a form of reconstruction. Here and now, this audience, so it means on the stage there are actors, performers, not Clara, not Reda, not Eduard.
A my teda tak zdvíjame tváre s vínom a všetci spievame, ako vieme tie arie naspamäť.
A potom o 2 hodiny neskôr odstavili bicykel na druhej strane.
It's not like we're playing characters. Sometimes I have words of Eduard. Sometimes I have words of policeman or Reda. So, yeah. All right, I'm Jacquet. I'm an actor, and yeah, that's it.
Povedal som, už nevládam. Ona odpovedala, chápem. Snažil som sa predstaviť si nasledujúce mesiace svojho života a videl som ten súdny proces.
I was approached by the directress Barbara Chovancová, and then she explained to me her vision of it, and I was like, I had some doubt before, and because I couldn't imagine it, and I didn't read the book before. So after she told me about everything, I read the book, and immediately I understood what she meant by narrative theatre and this approach, and I started really liking it, so I enjoyed. I'm trying to think about something, but I think what is quite precious about this is that it's a true story, and it's not just fantasy, it's not just literature, it's a true story, so it's freezing, I'd say, when you're reading it or just think about this story, and when you hear all those stuff, what happened, it's terrifying.
People don't need God to be afraid of this. Someone to destroy them. We can handle that ourselves. I think this characteristic really might be the best result of human evolution so far.
It's narrative theatre, so we just retelling the stories. We don't show like typical dramatic situations, like we don't show how it looked like in, like we think it looked like. We're just retelling the stories, and the audience needs to create it in their own mind. They're imagining all those situations, all those stuff, all those feelings and everything. So audience is like really involved. Like they're not sitting there in just their comfortable seat, but they are like literally like challenged. I think like history of violence could be very kind of big challenge for the audience, because it's not very comfortable to see it. Yes, because we still are more conservative countries, I think, and for people sometimes it's a bit challenging to accept some different visions, but I don't think no, I think like people are very, very kind and gentle, and maybe we were listening from the government, you know, like government literally abused this topic for like made an enemies from LGBTQ community, and if someone is telling this to people like constantly, it's a bit hard to think something else and be more tender.
But it's not only about minorities, actually it's society, because society is made of different groups of people. So it's not treating the topics of minorities, it is more of speaking about the society as it is in complexity.
Some minorities have cultural institutions in Slovakia. And once Slovakia was independent, these institutions just simply continue to work and develop themselves. So we have such institutions like museums, theaters for Germans, Roma, for Hungarians, Russians, and also Ukrainians.
Slovak society has long been characterized by a mixture of different minorities, not without any tensions. And some policies have been implemented to promote cultural diversity and minority rights. One of Slovakia's strengths is that the country is decentralized, which ensures that culture is accessible in every corner of the country, even in smaller towns. And the widespread construction of houses of culture during the communist era then helped to create some cultural places in different languages and for different ethnic groups. However, minorities still face many discrimination today in Slovakia, and continued efforts are needed to create a more inclusive society.
Well, I'm inspired mostly by really good texts, but of course I live in this world and I know what's happening around me, and it plays a big role, of course, because we're living it, me and the actors, and it's also the thing we need to be confronted with. So of course it's important, but I don't really like making theater straightly politically. I mean, like a quick reaction to what some politicians said. For me, it's not the good way. I prefer looking for the ways that are more universal or existential.
One year after Tepraven's hate crime against the LGBT+ community in Bratislava, have you noticed a change in queer representation and the way young artists and playwrights are treating this subject?
I'm so glad that there is more and more queer artists also in Slovakia. I love to see their work, to work with them. I value them highly as my colleagues. But yeah, it should be more. But it's not only about queer artists. It is just to be open towards queer representation in general. It shouldn't be solely the thing of independent scene. We need more queer representation in the theater institutions. So, thanks for having me. I'm Alžbeta Vrzgula and I'm playwright and director working in theater field, and I'm based in Bratislava, but working all around. Angle 92 in Slovak Uhol 92. It means that we three founding members, we were born in 92, and so we see ourselves as members of first generation of Slovakia, of Slovak state, created after the shoot of the Soviet era, Soviet bloc. So we think that our the way we see the world and the way we experience the world and society changing in Slovakia is somewhat different from the generations before us and after us.
Prečo sú ženy občas tak protivné, kritické, vzťahovačné, hysterické a presídlivé? Prečo sú ženy občas tak protivné, kritické, vzťahovačné, hysterické a precitlivé? Prečo sú ženy... Moja teória, áno. Prečo sú ženy občas tak protivné, kritické, vzťahovačné, hysterické a precitlivé? Aj piatok.
Ku knihe predáva magnetku, ktorá ukazuje fázy cyklickej ženy.
Výkonného parťáka. Tvorivé čarodejnice.
Fázu múdrej vedy.
Z chladničky na mňa kričí: objavte fázu sexuálnej bohyne. A potom...
Do you have enough light?
I think it's nice because it looks good actually.
Okay.
Yes, because you describe yourself as the first generations of actors born after the fall of Czechoslovakia. And how does this influence your work, and how do you think that your generation is different from the previous one, but also from the next one, the one born after 2000, for example?
We three founding members, we are actually directors and dramaturgs, but we work with actors and other artists of a same age group. So yeah, we can say that we still represent this generation we are talking about. The thing is that we grew up during 90s, wild 90s in Slovakia with capitalism booming wildly, but still we have this heritage of post-socialist thinking and mindset inherited from our parents. So the world is not that piece of cake as maybe the younger generation see it. Yes, so we are as old as our state is, so we go through specific life stages together, like early adulthood and depressive 30s. So we try to speak about it through theater.
The emergence of independent Slovakia in 1993 was marked with a really chaotic situation politically, economically, and also culturally. Politically, because of the separation of the state that was here for a few decades, and well, it's still considered that this split has happened in an improper way. But there were some reasons for it. One of it was the war in Yugoslavia, and the thing that politicians simply were scared of the escalating situation also in Czechoslovakia. There was also the thing that politics had ulterior motives behind separating Slovakia from the Czech Republic, so they had bigger control over the tunneling of state property in Slovakia, and that was something that happened and that drastically damaged the economic state of the country. And in this unstable position, a huge frustration came between people, and it strongly polarized the opinions between pro-European and pro-national people who were just fighting against each other back in that time.
Ako sa napojím na zápisky minulosti, ktoré v sebe nesie každá jedna z nás? A ja tieto odpovede poznám a vy sa ich dnes dozviete. Múdrosť ženského princípu nás obklopuje stále. Ale až my ju musíme pustiť do svojho vnútra. Naslúchajte dianiu.
Naslúchajte dianiu.
Dokážete to? Pozrite sa do zrkadla.
Well, there are not that many active playwrights in Slovakia in general, male or female, so it's in the same time hard but also liberating that you can write what you will later stage, as it is in my case. And plus, yeah, to be a woman in this industry, it's always and still different than to be a man, as I see it or as I imagine it, because some people consider me to be that I am an actress, not director, for example. It's the first thing that comes to mind of people if you say that you are working in theater as a woman, that you are an actress.
To be a theater director, both in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, is still difficult, still like not normal, which I don't understand at all. Because I also have experience from Poland, where I experienced that me being a woman didn't mean anything. Like, I mean it like it was great. We were talking about my work and not my gender. But here, I don't know.
To deal with the collective unconscious demands a solid ego consciousness and an adequate adaptation to reality. Woman is not the source of life. Immaculate conception is scientific nonsense. Woman is not magically connected to the elements or planets' movements. Woman does not have any special access to the secrets of our ancestors. Woman is not the source of life. There is something she lacks. Something very, very small, but still. We can't do this alone. To make our species survive, we need collaboration. But now, 120 years after the suffragettes, you still feel the need to justify your right to make your own decisions, to have your own worldview, to be entitled to exist as you want. 21st century, men need to justify to themselves they are still enough. Women need to justify to themselves their existence. You are only at the beginning to suffer. Right now I'm working on the few next works, and I dove into the Greek and other myths, and I'm exploring how these archetypes are still shaping our view of the world. Just to be more specific, I'm trying to cover positive masculinity, how to find positive masculinity in the world where all masculinity was branded as toxic. Because to have a society that is functional, that is not sick, we need to see it as a complex organism full of people of different genders and opinions and identities. So yeah, I'm always back in this topic of society and exploring what it means, how we can live together.
To je len stího mám vyplazených jazykov a človek s hlavou takto dopredu len beží. Len beží, celý život len beží a 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 celý život len beží a beží.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm an actor, and I've played in this performance that's called Humiliated and Bloodthirsty, and I'm 29, and I'm an actor, which I already said.
Ale len potom asfalty, o ktorý sa v jednom momente proste musí rozbiť. Chápete? Toto je ten systém, vybudovaný, vopred postavený Matrix a my ho tu žijeme. My ho žijeme, pretože niekomu to asi vyhovuje, niekto z toho má prospech.
I remember the saying that it is a shout. It's shout out for everything that is painful for us, maybe, or it's a topic for us to talk about to not the general public, but how to describe our generation. And Alžbeta is really profound into like formulating those kind of stuff. Like what are the itches that we have? Like what is it? Like we're young people, we don't have many opportunities to like really present ourselves. It's really hard to get by. It's really hard to get through, to be what you want to be. And I think the play really sums up not only this kind of stuff that I just described, but also the kind of theatrical kind of way that she thinks and writes things. And I really I've never had kind of opportunity to work on such a script and such a directorial kind of approach to a play that it will really like blend all those stuff together, like dancing, singing, acting, but a different kind of acting that I was used to and thought on school, actually. Not the, like really emotional kind of engaged way, like Stanislavski stuff. But she really mixes those things together so well that you don't need to say, or not say, we're saying a lot, but you don't need to act much more than it's written and it's directed by her. So it was really a pleasure to work with her on like for me, really a new territory of kind of acting approach, of kind of sending the message to the audience with a different kind of stuff that I'm used to in the different theaters that I'm working in. You know, when I was younger, I think that was the first thing that my parents actually signed me up to, like the singing classes. There is a monologue that I'm saying that the theater is played by the politicians, and actually there was elections happening like half a month ago, and it didn't end up really well for us, and we put some words that maybe I think were really hitting the point that what is happening right now in our government. And that would be like really hard for years for us, for culture as well, because I said there that you know, many peoples are like playing. That was the word that we were saying. That play is the word that is abused in a different ways. But to play means like someone is faking something.
Johan, píšem si, odkiaľ.
Teraz bude príjmať správy.
Áno, Johan, takže podarilo sa nám spáliť tie obrazy svätých, ako ste chceli.
Regarding the last political events in Slovakia and the outcome of the last election, you evoke in one of your play Boundaries 92 this generation of young Slovaks who want to move abroad. There is this quote, "I need to move to Czechia." Would you say you're still optimistic about the future?
It is a really broad topic, this reality of young people leaving this country, because the reasons are various and many. But in general, I think right now, in the aftermath of elections, we should just collect our strength and our energy and continue our work. Maybe it will be harder than we thought it would be, but yeah, for me it's not the time to question whether I'm optimist or pessimist now. It's just let's keep on swimming.
It's not about the country, it's about the humankind, I think, because we can see like homophobic behavior or xenophobic behavior or police violence also in our country, in every country, I think. So it's the question of humankind in general, it's not a question of the country.
Viktor Orbán požehnal obrovskú sochu mýtického vtáka Turula, ktorého ako symbol používali maďarskí fašisti. Hovorí o maďarskom pranárode, čistokrvnom pôvodnom obyvateľstve, ktoré je treba chrániť. Orbán nechal tiež preniesť z múzea do parlamentu stredovekú korunu svätého Štefana, ktorý priniesol do Maďarska kresťanstvo. Podľa nového zákona hrozí za zneváženie svätej koruny, teda za vtip alebo karikatúru, rok väzenia. Andrej Babiš odmietol prezývku český Donald Trump so slovami: "Nejsom populista, som pragmatik."
I impersonate in this play a guy who was theological kind of dictator. And that's the thing, that we have to be aware of guys that say maybe truth for us, but later in their life or in their like direction, they tend to fall into kind of like dictatorship. And that is what was happening actually in a book that Alžbeta, get the inspiration to write this play. Actually, it was called Consciousness Against Violence, and it was by Stefan Zweig. And that was actually a book about this guy, Castellio, I don't know what is his first name, and a guy, it's Johannes Calvin. And there was a situation in Switzerland where actually it fell down to be theocratic dictatorship by him. But first, people liked him because he told the truth. And that was the premise, that we have to be aware of guys that are still saying the truth. Maybe they're like, we're affected by them, we like them, but then we have to, be aware of who do we trust in this kind of world.
Pre-war and post-war culture.
Dobre, ja priznávam istú ateistickú inklináciu, alebo veľmi sympatickom a tolerantnom trojbale.
Those costumes, actually, for which our costume designer, Bedmoth, won a kind of prestigious, like really the biggest maybe theatrical award in Bratislava in Slovakia. It's called Dosky. It's like, Dosky, it's like a slab of wood that we are standing on. Like, it's connotation that we're playing on a wood boards, so the award is named after that. Like, she won a board actually, and that's the connotation that we are trying to, as we are going into liking this kind of person that is a dictator that we don't know, we get on with his merch, we get on with his ideas, and we are manipulated in kind of way. And that kind of like merch that we had there was just a symbol for that we fell for it. We just believed someone who just manipulated us.
Theatre is a place for sharing, learning, and confronting our own reality. At a time marked by the rise of extremes in Europe and political instability, it has become increasingly difficult to distinguish truth from misinformation. And it was with this in mind that Divadlo Ludus decided to stage German Hausauer Kirsten Fuchs' monologue Nashishati, or Homeland Dress, which describes the impact of right-wing slogans and probes the limits of tolerance and freedom of expression through the character of Claire, a young fashion blogger who is politically uninformed. Barbara Chovancová took part in the production of this play on the Slovak stage, as well as organizing performances in classrooms, in order to convey the powerful emotional experience of the main character to a young and easily influenced audience.
We created Nashishati in 2019, and first of all, it's a great lesson of critical thinking. And now it's played in a bit different version, so that the one actress comes to the classrooms and makes a smaller performance than it's the theatrical version, and she plays it a lot. And when we see how the kids react, there is still hope.
In Slovakia, as elsewhere, theatre is a mirror that reflects society. It offers insights into our own experiences, inspires us, makes us think, and gives us a sense of community by reminding what may have united or impacted us as a society. Above all, it gives us hope.
We people have been stacking stones for millennia. Back then, and today too, man shouts to the world, I was here, I lived. Or also, I was here and I survived, follow me, this path is safe. On a desolate plain or in the desert, We would die of thirst without them. Stones have divided territories and walls have separated families for entire generations.
We place stones on the graves of our loved ones, bury their bodies on the rocks, build monuments over them. I guess it's to make it easy to find the grave later, or to make the next generations remember the generations divided by war forever.
We don't really care about the critical feedback, for example, but when we see this 14-year-old girl crying because she's so touched, that's the biggest award.
But what I'm trying to say is, like, you can be inspired by anything. Like, and when you're asking, well, you can be inspired by real life, or obviously by your experience, by other kinds of art. And it would be very naive to think like there is only theatre. I think you need to be very open to or and have that feeling that you're longing to see and explore more. Like, you can be inspired by seeing some great exhibition in gallery or music or any other kind of art. And it's really important, I think, to be aware of what's going on in the world, not to stay in your bubble, in your country. Like, I personally like Polish and German theatre, but that's my personal taste, I'd say.
And because a lot of people that still lives today have been raised in that communist regime that pushed just the folklore to the forward, and the other forms of culture were just underestimated. It's still pretty hard for some people to understand the culture and the concept of culture of Slovakia in its wider sense, that it's not only about something that's originally here, but it might be also something that's mixed with other cultures, something that was in the past multicultural, like, for example, culture of Bratislava. It was a Slovak culture because it's connected to the Slovak nation, but it's also the question for Slovaks that how can we adapt the culture of our ancestors for present day.
Everyone wants to know who he or she is, but the answer is never simple. And this is it with Slovak identity or Central European story, that we are in a really tight contact with other countries around us, and we should say it aloud and be proud of it, that we are a mixture of cultures, because in this variety there's the richness.